Hello students, I am Dr. Harpreet Singh from the Department of Business Management, Guru Nanak Dev University's regional campus at Gurdaspur. Behavior is a difficult subject because it is an extremely complex phenomena. But behavior is not totally unpredictable, as there is a cause and effect relation that can be generalized to understand behavior. A systematic study of behavior leads to development of models that can help in describing certain behavioral patterns. Although each person is unique in his or her way, yet some behavioral patterns can be generalized. While certain aspects of behavior may be generic in nature, much of the work-related behavior can be understood because of some identifiable causes. It is assumed that human action is typically a result of a set of forces which can be identified and possibly measured. If these forces can be accurately studied and their impact on human behavior correlated, then it would be possible to predict certain aspects of such behavior. For example, an employee who is not satisfied is more likely to find a new job, or will try to find a new job and leave the current one. If the employer is able to understand the reasons of dissatisfaction of the employee, then by finding the solution to that dissatisfaction, he or she, the employee, can be made more loyal to the employer. Research is a process of collecting information in a systematic manner. Research helps in understanding the behavior of a person or a group in an organization. The ongoing research on organization behavior enhances to the existing knowledge of organization behavior with the help of some supporting and contradicting theories and replacing the theories with new ones. Purpose of research. The four major purposes of research are: first, description. In a homogeneous population, there are many similar aspects of behavior. These characteristics are qualified into different groups so that each aspect of behavior can be studied more thoroughly. Second, explanation. When behavior is clearly described, then the reasons for occurrence of certain type of behavior can be determined. For example, financial constraints to meet the demand lead to depression and tension. Third, prediction. When the cause and effect relationship with regards to certain behavioral pattern is drawn, then it is possible to predict the behavior. Some behavioral patterns are predictable on the basis of similar past situations. For example, morale of an individual will be high by knowing that somebody praised his or her contribution and achievement. Fourth, control. The ultimate conclusion of any research is the ability to control and manipulate the outcome of the events. Research terminology. In the field of research, various terms are frequently used by the researchers. Some of the common terms used in research are as follows. Firstly, variable. A variable is a characteristic that can be measured, and in organization behavior, it includes personality, job satisfaction, job stress, productivity of the employees, turnover rate, etc. These variables can change according to the environmental conditions and time. Dependent variables. A dependent variable is affected by the change in one of the independent variables. The researchers are interested in the study of dependent variables with a change in independent variables. Dependent variables in organization behavior are productivity, absenteeism, turnover, job satisfaction, etc. Now, independent variable. An independent variable is free from the effect of any other variable. Independent variables are studied to identify their impact on the dependent variables. Independent variables in organization behavior are intelligence, motivation, experience, personality, leadership styles, selection methods, bonus, incentives, etc. Then moderating variable. A moderating variable helps in controlling the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. For example, productivity is a dependent variable and work supervision is taken as an independent variable. When the level of work supervision is increased, then productivity also gets enhanced. But it can be controlled by the complexity of the job under consideration. Hypothesis. These are the assumptions related to the relationship between two or more variables. Two types of hypotheses are there: null and alternative. Hypothesis is proven on a collected data with the help of applying some statistical techniques and tests. Then causality. It is an assumption which tries to exhibit the cause and effect relationship. It assumes that variation in the independent variable leads to variation in the dependent variable. For example, high productivity leads to more satisfaction amongst the employees. Then we have correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient helps in determining the magnitude and direction of covariance between two or more variables. The variables have a perfect positive correlation when the value of correlation coefficient is +1, and variables are having a perfect negative correlation when the value of correlation coefficient is -1. The purpose of correlation coefficient is to find out the strength of association between the variables. It has nothing to do with causality. Then we have another term called theory. Theory depicts a set of systematically interrelated concepts that help in explaining and predicting a phenomena. The reference of models and theories are often taken by the researchers in organization behavior. There are a lot of theories in organization behavior. For example, theories for motivation, theories for leadership styles, so on and so forth. In organization behavior, a common phenomena is explained by a number of theories because organization behavior is an active discipline and is still growing and evolving. Research design. When the result of research is less generalizable, then it becomes more specific. The result is less realistic when researcher tries to control the extraneous variables. The research becomes more expensive as the level of accuracy, generalizability, and control over the variables increases. The research is affected by time and money constraints. So, good research design is not a perfect design, but is mostly focused towards the objective of research. Following are the research designs along with their weaknesses and strengths. Case study. Case studies are based on real life situations. A case study is a description about an individual, a group, or an organization. Observations, interviews, records, documents are the main source of information for a case study. Advantages. It is helpful in initiating an exploratory research. It is helpful in evaluating real life situations. Disadvantages. It is affected by perceptual biasness of the reader of the case study. So, the interpretation of a case study varies from person to person. The beliefs of the writer also affect the content of a case study. It is difficult to generalize the result of a case study to another research. It is not possible to test a hypothesis from the data available from a case study. Field survey. In field survey, responses are collected from the respondents with the help of questionnaire or interviewed to collect specific information by the researchers related to the research problem. The responses given by the respondents are recorded, analyzed, and interpreted by the researchers. Most common method used for collecting data in field survey is the questionnaire method. It can easily record attitude and perception of the respondents. Advantages. Field survey is an economical method of research. It is easy to prepare data for analysis. Only a sample is studied by the researcher instead of whole population. It is an efficient method to know the opinion related to an issue of interest. Disadvantages. Mailed questionnaires have a low rate response of around 10%, and result drawn from such questionnaires is not reliable. Questionnaires is not efficient in measuring the behavior of the respondents. It is hard to collect in-depth information from field survey. Field survey is having less generalizability. Laboratory experiment. Laboratory experiment is conducted in an artificial environment. In this, a researcher can control the extraneous variables and manage the effect of independent variables of interest. The researcher is able to show the cause and effect relationship between the dependent and the independent variables because all the other factors are controlled in a laboratory experiment. Now, the advantages of a laboratory experiment. The level of control over the extraneous variables is high. Variables are measured with high degree of precision. And the disadvantages of this, it is difficult to generalize the findings of laboratory experiment in the real life situations, and the result of research is not valid in all the circumstances. Field experiment. Field experiment is very much similar to the laboratory experiment except for the fact that field experiment is performed in the real organization. The situations and circumstances are real, so the result becomes more valid. The level of control over the extraneous variables gets reduced. Advantages are like results and findings of field experiments are more valid, and the results of field experiment are having more generalization than laboratory experiment. The disadvantages of this, the accuracy of data gets reduced because variables are affected by the extraneous variables. It is hard to perform field experiment because most of the organizations are not ready to allow the researchers to conduct experiment in their organizations. Aggregate quantitative reviews. A number of experiments are conducted to study the overall effect of organizational behavior modification on the performance of employees. But it is difficult to generalize the effects of these studies. Researchers try to summarize the results of all the empirical studies to find the impact of organization behavior modification on performance of tasks. This is known as meta-analysis. The researchers were able to conclude that the average performance of a person will rise from the 50th percentile to the 67th percentile with application of OB modifications. The meta-analysis is a quantitative form of literature review that helps researchers to look at validity findings from a comprehensive set of individual studies and then apply a formula to them to determine if they consistently produced similar results. If the results are consistent, then it allows researchers to conclude more confidently that validity is generalizable. Meta-analysis is a means for overcoming the potentially imprecise interpretations of qualitative reviews and to synthesize variations in quantitative studies. In addition, the technique enables researchers to identify potential moderating variables between an independent and a dependent variable. Meta-analysis seems as a more objective measure of doing traditional literature reviews. The usage of meta-analysis leads to a significant amount of subjectivity into the process. Meta-analysis reviews have now become most popular in organization behavior literature. Data collection. Data can be of two types: primary data and secondary data. Primary data is first-hand data, while secondary data is already collected data from the problem other than the problem in hand. Primary data can be collected from the respondents through questionnaires, interviews, computers, observation, and unobtrusive methods. But the data mostly collected in OB research is through questionnaires. Questionnaires. A questionnaire is a set of structured questions to record the response of respondents. Questionnaires can be administered personally or through mail. Mail questionnaires are used to collect responses from a large number of respondents residing in different geographical areas. This method is the most economical and convenient method of data collection from widely spread respondents. Mail questionnaires are having poor response rate. Respondents are reluctant in giving the responses even when stamped self-addressed envelopes are given to them. A response rate of 30% is considered good, but generally mail questionnaires have even lesser response rate than 30%. It leads to non-representative data for research. Personally administered questionnaires are questionnaires given by the researchers to the respondents and immediately collected from them after completion. The response rate is almost 100% in this method, but it is expensive and time-consuming in comparison to mail questionnaires. This method is used for data collection only when the purpose of study is of importance to the organization. Interviews. Interviews are a good source of information. In structured interviews, specific questions are asked to the respondents and the responses are noted by the interviewer. In unstructured interviews, there is no predetermined format. Questions are framed according to the responses given to the previous questions by the respondents. Structured interviews are conducted when the interviewer knows precisely what sort of information is needed. They are efficient in terms of the amount of time involved in both obtaining the required information and categorizing the data that has been obtained. Unstructured interviews, on the other hand, are used to explore a problem or collect more qualitative information related to a particular situation. Face-to-face interviews help the researcher to observe the respondents as how they respond to a question. Researchers are more able to explore further from the non-verbal messages transmitted by the respondents. Then we have telephone interviews. These interviews help the researcher to collect the responses from the respondents residing in different geographical areas. Both the methods of interviews are affected by biasness. The sources of biasness are the way a question is asked, variation in voice, state of mind of the respondents during interviews, etc. Computers. As people are becoming more comfortable with technology and specifically in using their computers at home, so they easily respond to questions displayed on websites. In the current scenario, computer assisted interviewing and computer aided surveys are very much popular. The methods of data collection like interview and questionnaire are greatly supported by computers. However, there is a requirement of computer literacy of respondents for effectively using computer assisted data collection techniques. Observational surveys. In observational surveys, data are collected without asking questions to the respondents. Researchers observe how respondents are behaving in a specific setting. The data are collected by either non-participant observers or participant observers. Observational survey can be of two types, structured and unstructured. If the researcher specifies the factors that are to be observed, then the observational survey is structured. For example, if the researcher wants to know the number of times instructions are given by the manager, while in an unstructured observational survey, the researcher wants to know the various activities performed by the manager during the day at the workplace. Observational studies help in reducing respondent bias as data is not collected from the respondents directly. Unobtrusive methods. Unobtrusive methods lead to collection of a valid and reliable data and minimize the biasness because the source of information is tangible things instead of people. For instance, if the wear and tear on the library books can be used to determine the usage of books, then the source of information is more reliable than surveys of uses of the library. A good idea of the beverage consumption can be drawn from the number of empty cans or bottles in the recycle bins outside houses or garbage collection centers. The absenteeism patterns of employees can be shown by the personal records of a company. Unobtrusive methods help in collecting the most reliable and unbiased data, but these methods are difficult to conduct and they are quite time consuming. It is difficult for a researcher to assess the internal records of an organization. Evaluating research. Evaluation of research involves validity, reliability, and generalizability of research. Validity. Validity means the scale used for measurement is appropriate for measurement of that particular characteristic. Reliability. Reliability refers to the consistency of measurement. When the experiment is performed again, a given set of conditions, then the result should remain the same. Generalizability. Generalizability means the findings of research from one group of individuals should be applicable to the other group as well, which is not a part of the current study. Ethics in research. Researchers should use the questions in such a way that the respondents feel comfortable in answering them. But all the researchers are not so tactful during their fieldwork. Researchers also hide the real purpose of studies to record honest response from the respondents. For example, in 2001, a professor of organizational behavior at Columbia University sent out a common letter written on university letterhead to 240 New York City restaurants in which he described how he had eaten at this restaurant with his wife in celebration of their wedding anniversary, how he had got food poisoning, and that he had spent the night in his bathroom throwing up. The letter closed with, "Although it is not my intention to file any reports with the Better Business Bureau or the Department of Health, I want you to understand what I went through in anticipation that you will respond accordingly. I await your response." The fictitious letter was part of the professor's study to determine the response of restaurants towards the complaints. But it led to unnecessary chaos among many of the restaurant owners, managers, and chefs as they reviewed menus and produced deliveries for possibly spoiled food and questioned kitchen workers about possible lapses. A follow-up letter of apology from the university for an egregious error in judgment by a junior faculty member did little to offset the distress it created for those affected. American Psychological Association, the American Sociological Association, and the Academy of Management are the professional associations who have published formal guidelines for the conduct of research. Ethical issues are still there. If the research is conducted in strict ethical controls, then it can affect the validity of an experiment. There are two types of debates. Researchers give the argument against strict ethical controls that many a time deception is often required to avoid original response, while other argument is in favor of ethical controls that tries to protect the rights of participants. Those favoring strict ethical controls argue that a researcher should be completely honest with their respondents and try to protect the privacy of respondents at all costs. So, students, let's now summarize what we have learned. Behavior is a difficult subject because it is an extremely complex phenomena. But behavior is not totally unpredictable, as there is a cause and effect relationship that can be generalized to understand behavior. A systematic study of behavior leads to the development of models that can help in describing certain behavioral patterns. Organizational behavior is a subject based on a large number of theories and research. The concepts of organization behavior are the result of systematic information gathering. But many of the issues in organizational behavior need more research. Research has four major purposes, and these four purposes are description, explanation, prediction, and control of behavior. Evaluation of research involves validity, reliability, and generalizability of research. The research becomes more expensive as the level of accuracy, generalizability, and control over the variables increase. The research is affected by time and money constraints. So, a good research design is not a perfect design, but it is the most focused design towards the objectives of that particular research. The methods used for research in OB reduce the generalizability of results. It is difficult to keep up with the latest findings in OB because OB is a growing and evolving discipline. To develop a regular review, the latest research in organizational behavior is required. Thank you.